The Air Force is understood to have attacked a shipment of missiles in Syria. Israeli media report that the strike targeted what officials are calling game-changing weapons on their way to the militant group Hezbollah. The Israeli government has repeatedly warned that it would act to stop arms reaching Hezbollah fighters. Well, for more on this, Saika Al-Makhadhi is a Syrian specialist. He joins us now from Milan via Skype. Afternoon to you. What's your reading of what you've been hearing about there?
Well, you know, throughout this civil war in Syria, Israel's biggest fear has not been whether Bashar al-Assad wins the revolution or whether the rebels come out on top. It hasn't been whether 70,000 people have died. It hasn't been, you know, how bad the fighting has become. It's actually a factor outside of Syria, and that is Hezbollah. They're incredibly worried about Hezbollah's involvement in the civil war and about the fact that they could get their hands on an increased number of weapons and possibly Syria's chemical weapons, if indeed they do turn out to have large stockpiles. So what's happened now is that because, of course, Hassan Nasrallah, the leader of Hezbollah, was speaking a couple of days ago on Tuesday. He spoke and admitted for the first time that Hezbollah was active in the Syrian civil war and was sending fighters into the country. The following day, I was by the border between Syria and Lebanon, and, you know, Hezbollah was very open in giving access to fighters that were allied to its forces. So it's now, you know, making no pretense about the fact that it's got its hands inside Syria. And of course, Israel's worried that eventually that will mean that they will increase their strength inside Syria and possibly get their hands on weapons. You know, inside Israel as well, the hardliners have been increasing their pressure on Benjamin Netanyahu to take some kind of action in Syria. Israel, though, is really tied. It doesn't know what to do. It's been very, you know, content with the leadership of the Assad rule, which has kept the border silent for 40 years. On the other hand, you know, it's happy to see one of its arch foes weakened to some extent by this ongoing war of attrition. So it's tied. It doesn't know which side to support. But, you know, it's interesting that Amos Gilad, a senior official within the Israeli Defense Ministry, did admit that he doesn't believe that Hezbollah is trying to get its hands on Syria's chemical weapons. So this seems to be more of a symbolic act than anything else. It's not going to change the war. It's not going to change any transfer of weapons between Syria and Hezbollah. It's an act for a domestic audience.
So it's interesting you use that word symbolic. So your suspicion is that the spectre of chemical weapons being transferred to Hezbollah may not be quite as accurate as it's portrayed?
No, I don't think that, you know, if there is any flow of weapons going on across the Syria-Lebanese border at the moment, it's from Lebanon into Syria. You know, Syria's regime is not concerning itself about where to store and save its weapons and what to do after it falls. It's worried about saving itself, and it's worried about getting weapons into the country, and they're coming from, you know, across the Iraqi border, across the Lebanese border, coming in by air. And, you know, to suddenly say, well, actually, there's been a shipment heading in the opposite direction sounds quite suspicious to me. Sounds very inconsistent with what we've been hearing.
Okay. Saika, many thanks. Saika Al-Makhadhi joining us live there from Milan.